It's been 10 years since I last went on a job interview, but here I am at the age of 44, and I've decided to continue doing what I love. My name is Alex Price, and I'm a mechanical design engineer. I'm new to the area, and truth be told, this company used to be one of my biggest competitors. I have a feeling they will offer me a job when they see what I have to offer them. Soon, hopefully, things will fall into place. My plan, that is, my plan to get rid of my cheating wife. I met Holly in 1993, and even now I can picture her in that time. She was beautiful and so confident. I, on the other hand, was shy and introverted. I guess being raised by a bossy bitch mother has that effect on a guy. She also had help from her ugly sisters. Their names were Megan and Anna, and they bullied me my entire childhood. Megan was the oldest and 13 years older than me. Anna was 10 years older. Apparently, I was a mistake and was not planned, and they all blamed my birth on my parents' breakup. My father left home in 1977 when I was 5 years old and never came back. It wasn't until recently that I learned the truth. "Come on in, Mr. Price. Nice to meet you." I was immediately attracted to the cordiality of Robert Williams, owner of Sutton Hydraulics. He was the exact opposite of the bastard I was leaving. "Thank you for having me, Mr. Williams," I said cordially. I took a seat in his imposing office and he sat across from me and began to speak. "I'm surprised you're leaving Walker Engineering, Mr. Price." "Please call me Alex, and I can't wait to get out of there," I replied. "They're doing a great job there, Mr. Price. Alex, I'm sorry." He was still looking at me with a look of confusion on his face. "I'm doing a great job, Mr. Williams." "Please call me Robert," he interjected. "As I said, I've worked hard for the last 10 years, and it's been my developments that have moved the company forward. All without much thanks and lately without any respect." He looked at me seriously for a few seconds. I hadn't said anything about my situation, and I was willing to keep it a secret for now. "There's no doubt I want you here, Alex. I can offer you the package you asked for, which amounts to a raise of several £1,000s. But you also said on the phone that if you could help us win a few more contracts, you'd like a commission. Is that correct?" He furrowed his eyebrows. "Yes." "I hope it's not something illegal, Alex. I'm not going to be involved in it," he said. I raised my hand to assure him of my honorable intentions. "I interact a lot with our customers. I interact with them on a daily basis. I know what they pay for our products, and I know the contracts practically inside out," I began to explain to an attentive Robert Williams. "How would anyone know that we offer more favorable terms? And with my designs and your team, we can be the best in the game. What do you say?" I suggested confidently. He held out his hand and I shook it. I looked into his eyes and saw that I was looking at a man of integrity. Another part of the plan was accomplished. Now back to my cheating wife, Holly. We met at Kingston University in South London. She was in her final year of a creative writing degree, and I was completing my master's in mechanical engineering and design. As I said, I was too shy to approach her, and she had never lacked attention from men. She was 5 feet 5 inches tall, with brown hair and big brown eyes. She was the kind of woman you could get lost in. She had a beautiful body, but I knew she was beyond me. All the guys that ran after her were outgoing and popular. To my surprise, one of her friends started talking to me at the party, and Holly came over and joined us. I had little experience with women, and I think my modesty and shyness made me attractive to her. I got up the courage to ask her out, and we started dating. After about 6 months of dating, I heard rumors that she was having sex with other guys, but I had no way to prove it, and I was afraid to confront her. Holly was a spoiled child. Her parents spoiled her and her sister Caroline, and for most of our relationship, I had to put up with her acting like a princess. If she wasn't doing well, she would make a fuss and wasn't shy about causing trouble in public, which confused me. My friends couldn't stand her and thought I should get rid of her, but I fell in love, and I had never experienced anything like it before. When we graduated, we both got jobs and were able to rent an apartment near Southampton in Hampshire. Her family were from there, and I had long since stopped having anything in common with mine. We married a year later, and the following year Sophie was born, followed by Ava a couple more years later. Holly loved being a mom, and everything between us has been great ever since. I was promoted several times, and 10 years ago I started working for Walker Engineering. Pay raises and bonuses helped us save up for a better house, but like most people in the world, 2008 was a bad year. The economic downturn has meant that many people have lost their jobs. It became harder to get contracts, so we all had to step up our work and work longer hours without getting any extra money. It was during this time, when both girls were in high school, that I realized that Holly was having an affair with some guy from our old university. I was so focused on work that by the time it was over, I never realized who it was, and my best friend Toby thought it was a guy from her class who had moved nearby. I brought it up to her one day and she just laughed in my face and told me to stop being stupid. But I knew she was lying. Thanks to the fact that I was able to keep my job and a good salary, I was able to buy a nice house. Holly had always demanded that I buy a house to match our status, whatever that meant, but as always, I relented, and we managed to buy a nice detached 5-bed house in Southampton. It was a buyer's market at the time, so we got a good price, although the mortgage was a bit high. The only thing I did out of line was to open a new savings account in my name only. I only put my year-end bonus into it, and since I was the sole breadwinner and in charge of all the finances and banking, I don't think Holly would have known about it even if I'd waved the receipts in her face. In retrospect, it turned out to be one of the best things I could have done. I needed protection because I wasn't sure if Holly was planning on leaving me if the old lover ever came back. After that, things went back to normal, and the girls were always my top priority. I encouraged them in their studies and tried to spend a lot of time with them on weekends. In fact, I was the one who took them to dance classes, concerts, and the zoo more times than I can remember. Holly always seemed too busy on her coffee dates with her other spoiled and lazy friends. I rarely socialized with other husbands, but we all seemed nepotistic and subservient to one degree or another. My friends would sing me the Rolling Stones song Under My Thumb when I had to cancel plans in favor of something Holly wanted to do. Even at work, the guys on the factory floor made comments about my marital status, especially Holly's control over me. It was only a few months ago that everything fell into place. Ava had just left for university, and for the first time in 18 years, Holly and I were alone. Both girls went to our old alma mater, and as I was finishing unpacking Ava's things in the apartment she would be sharing with her sister, she turned to me and asked why I was even with their mother. I was stunned, for she had always been such a quiet girl like her old father. "Daddy, I heard she's hanging around with Henry Walker at your company," Ava said. I can still remember the tears in her eyes when she spoke. It was news to me, but I wasn't surprised. All these years I could have investigated her adventures, but I never did for fear of breaking up the family and having my girls suffer for it and resent me like my sisters resented my father. I let her cuckold me because the alternative did not bear thinking about. I still loved her, but I loved what we had created even more. This news made several impressions on me. First, I realized for the first time that the level of hostility my girls felt toward their mother was much higher than I had imagined. They loved and respected me, but I knew they were disappointed that I hadn't taken a tougher stance toward Holly. Secondly, it made me remember the old feelings I had for the women in my life while growing up and how that contributed to my weaknesses. And finally, I realized that at work the employees openly talk and laugh at me, and most of all at Henry Walker, who turned out to be the nephew of Jack, the owner of the company, and the man I was cuckolded by. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I couldn't take it anymore, especially now that my youngest daughter had found out about how Holly was making fun of me. I knew I had to stand up to her. My heart was racing as I sat at the kitchen table waiting for Holly to come home. When she finally showed up, I found that I couldn't talk anymore. She just looked at me with what I might call apathy and contempt. She didn't say anything to me as she put her bags away in the closets. Finally, I spoke up. "Are you having an affair with Holly?" She turned to face me, blushing slightly, but answered without hesitation. "I wouldn't call it a novel, darling." I was shocked by her confession and waited silently for her to explain why having sex with another man didn't count as an affair. "You're a wonderful person, Alex. You're a great provider and my best friend. But there are things you can't provide for me, and I'm not ashamed to say I want all of it," she said bluntly and openly. "So you're cheating on me," I said, discouraged by her brazen approach to infidelity. "Only my body," she said, "not my heart or my mind, Alex, which belong to you." My head was spinning and my stomach was knotted. The sheer audacity of her words made me speechless. "I've never turned you down for sex, Alex, and all I do is explore with a couple of young guys," she admitted. "What?" I shouted. I didn't raise my voice once, and my reaction took her by surprise. She walked around the table and took the seat across from me. "Don't yell at me, Alex," she said, regaining her composure. You admitted to cheating on me with 2 guys and I'm supposed to keep quiet, I replied. I love you, Alex, but this is how it's going to be. Deal with it or I'll still leave and be with them, she said, giving me both a threat and an ultimatum. I just sat there looking at her as her face softened. For a minute, I thought she saw the hurt on my face. Everyone does it these days, Alex. My girlfriends have had affairs with younger men, and they say it makes for a better marriage, she said. I was shocked. I had a hard time taking it all in before, and now Holly was actually trying to justify her cheating by telling me that all her friends were cheating too. As for her opinion that it would make our marriage better, it was dismissive at best. She didn't care about the marriage or me, only the comfort and security I could provide. I spoke again. So I can have another woman, is that what you're saying, Holly? She stared at me for a few seconds, then laughed in my face. I sat in silence as she continued to laugh, trying to pull myself together. Yes, Alex. Come on, be serious. You have trouble talking to women you've known for years. What chance do you have of talking to someone else? She was blatantly mocking me as she continued to giggle, and I felt embarrassed and ashamed, but she wouldn't give up. That's the way it's going to be, Alex, so don't ruin a good thing. I'm still your wife. I still love you, and I still come home to you every night. Don't ruin your life, don't complain about it, and don't do something you'll regret later. She left me at the table, thinking about what had just happened to my life, to my world. She talked so openly about her affairs that I realized she didn't care about me one bit. I didn't care that all her friends were whores, but that didn't give her the right to be one. Not only that, but she had the nerve to threaten me. I was angry, very angry. That night I slept in the spare room. I couldn't be near her, but around midnight Holly woke me up and asked me why I wasn't going to bed. Was she really that deluded? I knew she was a spoiled bitch, but really? Come on, Alex, get over it. That's the way the world works now. You're just acting like an old man, she said. I didn't say anything. I sensed her presence on the landing, peering into the spare room. Suit yourself, Alex. You'll be back in bed soon, I know it. You don't deny me anything, and you know as well as I do that I'll get my way, she said confidently. In reality, she was right. What had I done in my 22-year relationship that would indicate anything other than my unbridled devotion and willingness to go along with whatever she said and wanted? It was common knowledge that I was on her payroll, and now it was common knowledge among her friends and my coworkers that I was also a cuckold. I didn't sleep a wink, so I decided to go downstairs and watch TV. There was a show on about celebrities who trace their family tree, and while a lot of that flew past me, it got me thinking about my own family. I had no contact with my mother or sisters, but I started to remember my father. I remembered so little about him. Did he have a family? I guess he did. Why had he left, and was it as my mother said that he had abandoned us? Before I left for university, I found out from my brother-in-law that my father had died years ago, but my sisters denied knowing. That's when I decided to cut them out of my life. The next day, I was up and out of the house before Holly even showed up in our room. Thoughts of what she'd said to me were still swarming in my head, and I was desperately trying to focus on something more positive to get me through the day. I remembered the TV show from the night before and decided to make some inquiries about my father. The girls didn't need me as much anymore, and my wife was having sex with God knows who, so maybe answering questions about who and what my father was would keep me busy. Good morning, Alex. I turned to see who was talking and faced Henry Walker. The smug look on his face, as if he were ready to burst into laughter at any moment, made my blood boil. I just stared at him and said nothing. How's your wife doing? He asked, openly mocking me. I heard a few giggles from the grown men at the coffee machine. I just stared at them as they stood their ground. I walked past them as they continued to giggle at my expense. I felt like the whole world knew my business, and even my boss's secretary, Olivia, seemed to find my situation laughable and open to ridicule. Can I offer you anything, Mr. Price? Maybe a couple of balls? I looked up at her. What did you just say? I asked, looking into her eyes. She stepped from foot to foot and walked over to me. I told you there were no calls, she said, trying to suppress a laugh. I walked into my office and sat down at my desk. My day had gotten off to the worst possible start, and now I was a laughingstock both at work and at home. I tried my best to focus on my project, but the anger inside of me wouldn't subside. I decided to start looking for my father. All I knew was that he was born in Cambridgeshire and left us at the age of 38 in 1977, so I started looking for family history websites in the area. After a 30-minute search, I found that there were 14 people in Cambridgeshire named James Price, born in 1939. I knew that he might have died a few years before I went to university, so I was able to narrow it down to 3 possible people. I decided I didn't have time to search for each of them, so I posted a message on genealogy websites in each of the towns I found. As I sat in my office reflecting on the past 24 hours, I received a call from my boss, Jack. He wanted to talk to me in his office. Jack was a successful and wealthy man, but in his 60s he had been married 3 times. He was a cheater and a bully. He was one of those power-crazed types who demand respect but give nothing in return. Many times in the past I had considered leaving, but he always convinced me to stay. And yes, the money was the best around. The only thing I knew about him was that he was having sex with his secretary Olivia behind his 3rd wife's back. "It has come to my attention that your wife is playing a trick on you, Alex," he said sharply. "With your nephew," I snapped back. "Well, yeah, he's a temper guy. It runs in their family," he said, laughing when I stopped talking. "But that's what I want to talk to you about. I don't want this to affect the business, and family comes first for me, Alex. So if you get in trouble, you're the one who has to leave the company. Is that understood?" He spoke to me like an old schoolteacher punishing a child. I bit my lip as his impatient secretary Olivia hovered by the door. She was no doubt gathering information to pass on to her friends at the factory. Turning to leave, I wondered why a young woman like her would stoop to having sex with a dirty old man like Jack Walker. As I walked past her, I heard the giggling again. I lowered my head and walked out. As the door closed behind me, I heard explosive laughter that was clearly addressed to me. As I returned to my office, I realized that being here was not doing me any good. I had paid for my girl's education, and now all I was doing was funding my wife's infidelities. I was a pretty simple person. I liked my gadgets, but I could live without a big house. Most of my living expenses were Holly's indulgences. Weekly visits to the hairdresser and manicurist, her car and phone, and other unnecessary luxuries. I was usually happy at work. It was my place to be creative, and I was very successful. I was the one who designed many of the parts that were manufactured and sold here, and I was sure I could find work elsewhere. They just thought I was too weak, and they were right. I was not the confrontational type, and never made waves because I was content. I was good old Alex, a humble engineer that people could get around. I looked at the splash screen with a picture of the family on vacation, clicked my mouse, and my email page opened. Waiting for me was a message from a woman named Jennifer Holmes of the Cambridge Genealogical Committee. I was stunned at how quickly they responded, clicked the button, and read the message. I was stunned. Jennifer read my post asking for information about my father and contacted a woman who claimed to be his niece and had been on the same site many months earlier researching her family tree. Her name was Rachel Murray, and she was my cousin. I sent Jennifer my number and asked if Rachel could contact me. I left work feeling uplifted. As soon as I walked through the door, I could smell dinner cooking. I left my bag in the hallway and walked into the kitchen to find Holly busy cooking. We managed to mutter a greeting, but ate in silence. During dinner, Holly kept trying to make eye contact with me, but apparently she realized I was still angry. Until tonight, I hadn't been able to last a few hours without confusing her or letting her get her way. She broke the ice. "Can we talk about last night, Alex?" she asked meekly. "What's there to talk about? You explained everything perfectly last night. I'll either accept it or I won't, right?" For a few seconds, she looked at me with a look of regret on her face. But it didn't last long. She took a deep breath, cleared her throat, and continued. "You're a great husband, and you've never turned me down for anything, so please don't turn me down, Alexa." She was almost begging, as she always does to get what she wants. "If I'm so great, why cheat on me?" "Why make a fool of me?" I asked honestly. She panted and just brushed me off. She had no answer. She was just being selfish, and I was getting more and more tired of it. I couldn't do anything to make her happy anymore. How many hours I work to pay the bills and give her everything she wants, and all I get is disrespect and ridicule. I drive a 12-year-old Range Rover, and she drives a car that is less than 2 years old. "Listen, Alex, I have needs, and you just can't fulfill them. So either you can handle it like I know you can, or cede me to a younger man." "You mean Henry Walker?" "You could have used his name, Holly. Everyone knows he had sex with you," I interjected. "Yes, Henry and I are lovers, He's practically your boss, Alex, and one day he'll take over the company from his uncle, she said bluntly. So he's giving me what I need in bed right now, and if you don't relent and agree, I'll leave you and he'll give me everything else I want and need. I didn't say anything as usual. I just got up from my seat and walked into the office. I really wanted to hit someone or something, but instead I sank into my chair and screamed into my hands. Tears came to my eyes and I wanted to be anywhere but here and now. I found a tissue and wiped my eyes when the phone rang. I picked it up and heard an unfamiliar voice on the other end. It was Rachel. We talked for about an hour, and when I hung up, everything else went out of my head and a huge smile appeared on my face. Rachel was thrilled that I had decided to get involved with my father, and she had a lot to tell me. She was talking at 100 miles an hour, and I was having a hard time absorbing everything she was saying. I learned that my mom had actually kicked my dad out of the house and had lied to me my entire childhood. Sadly, he died in 1983 when I was only 11 years old. He died of alcohol poisoning, and his mother, my grandmother, always blamed my mom for his temper and mental state after he left us. Rachel told me that he really wanted to come back into my life, but was prevented from doing so. We arranged to meet up this weekend at her house in Cambridge. I was excited and knew the break would be good for me. The rest of the week dragged on. Everything was the same at home, but at work I was constantly being laughed at behind my back. Henry and his buddies thought it would be funny to hang a pair of panties on my office door. I looked at Olivia, but she didn't say anything. Inside the panties was a note that said, "Please go back to your wife." I was broken. I sat at my desk that day too and cried. I wanted to blame everyone but myself. I was glad when Saturday came. I told Holly I was going to visit a friend in London, and she didn't care what I was doing. I guessed that she would mock me, so her absence made it easier for her. The drive to Cambridge was a stressful one. The M25 highway proved to be a nightmare, as usual, and I ended up finding Rachel's house an hour after I was expected. This didn't seem to faze her as I was greeted with the best hug I've had in years. I was introduced to her husband Greg and 2 young children, Grace and William. Once the formalities were over, we moved on to talking about my father and my new family. Rachel had such a warm, unselfish personality, she and Greg were interjecting and finishing each other's sentences. I think they both couldn't wait to share our family story. During my stay there, we were joined by David and Lucy Price. He was my cousin and Rachel's brother. We got along very well and he added everything he knew about my father and family. After lunch, we went on a little trip where I had some time to think. When we got back, David and I talked about work and family life. He could tell things weren't going well, and for some reason I confided in both of my new cousins. They just told me not to put up with it and that they would support me if I needed anything. I was so grateful to them. I left Cambridge with a new perspective on things. I had been told so many lies and treated so badly throughout my life that realizing that I had a completely different family who had shown me more kindness and honesty in one day than most people I had known my whole life gave me hope. I needed to sort my life out and get back to being happy. Not just for myself, but for my girls, my friends, and my new family. By the time I got home, it was 8 o'clock in the evening, and Holly was just about to go out. "Where are you going, Holly?" I asked. "Out with friends." "You mean Henry or Max?" I snapped back. She looked at me, somewhat taken aback that I knew the name of her other lover. I gave her an understanding look. "Please don't do this again, Alex," she begged, seemingly indifferent to my feelings. "Please, Holly, I'm asking you to stop this and become my wife." "Stop being silly, Alex. I'm your wife and always will be. Don't deny me my pleasures and I'll make your life easier. I'll be back by midnight." She completely ignored my wishes and continued to threaten me. She approached me with her arms wide open and I turned my back to her. She said nothing to my blatant insult, just picked up her Prada purse and headed for the door. "Holly, as your husband, I'm asking you not to do this." My voice became harsher. She stopped where she was and looked at me, as if asking herself who this guy was and what he thought about talking to me like that. It only lasted a second before she burst out laughing. "What are you going to do, Alex? Leave me?" "You'll never have the courage to do that. We both know you'll always be by my side." I was mortified. I lowered my head as her words echoed in my head. "For me, no balls. Deny me my pleasures." I always knew she was a spoiled brat. Her parents made sure of that. I knew I treated her like a queen while I was the workhorse. I knew she was selfish, but I always believed she loved me more than anything. I knew I was a fool, and I knew I'd been one for too long. This had to end, and I needed to make plans to make it happen. I wasted no time and got down to business. I actually started when Henry or Max was having sex with her. Maybe they were doing it together. Perhaps that's what she meant when she said she liked getting brownies and eating them. I provide her with security, protection, and material goods, while two young assholes had sex with her as they pleased. These thoughts were driving me mad, and I was starting to lose my concentration. I needed to find a way to destroy the last vestiges of my attachment to her, and I think I found it. I found the box I was looking for, and the particular picture in it. It was the only picture of my mom and sisters. I didn't think it would work, but I cut Holly's face out of the picture and pasted it next to them. I had no love left for them, and adding Holly's smirking face to the picture might help. I put it on the desk next to the monitor in my office. At about 12:45, I was finishing up work. I had pretty much decided what I was going to do in the near future. I had an idea of when I would be leaving, but it could be in a few weeks. I had time because Holly didn't expect me to leave. It might not work out, and I would definitely need help to pull it all off, but by now I had convinced myself that I would go all the way. I heard someone stumble out the door, and as I got up to look out the window, I saw Henry Walker's car pull away. I heard her coming up the stairs and quickly erased my story. I would have to use incognito mode in the future. I waited for her to enter our bedroom and walked down the stairs to make myself some coffee. I sat down on the couch and thought about my future away from this place. And honestly, without my daughter's presence, I knew it wouldn't be so bad. I decided to try and move closer to them. Monday morning I came to work, clearly realizing that I wouldn't lift another finger. Jack Walker could fire me for all I cared. I walked to my office, ignoring the taunts and comments directed at me. I would destroy those bastards, and I knew my anger would get me through this. I managed to get an appointment with the bank for 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I took the time to prepare for it by analyzing my finances. The odds were slim, but if everything worked out and the right people helped me, I would come out of this situation unscathed. The meeting went as planned, and I was able to close my savings account and remove my name from our joint account. I still had an ISA with a few thousand in it, so I closed it for cash and put it in my wallet. On the way to the office, I stopped by the PC World store and bought 2 digital voice recorders, a 500 GB USB 3.0 hard drive, and a new hard drive for my PC. Back in the office, I sat down at my desk and began to see if I could open the company's personal client files. I'd seen a glimpse of them in Jack's office, so I knew they existed, but I needed his password. It didn't take me more than an hour to crack it. Ironically, his wife's name was his username, and the password was his name and 6-digit birthday number, Jack240656. I had everything I needed. I plugged the disk into my computer and loaded all the files onto it. 10 minutes later, I did the same with all my new plans and drawings for the energy-efficient hydraulic pump system I was working on to keep this company ahead of the curve. We were creating pumps for air conditioners, heavy equipment, and even the dairy sector. I erased all of my computer history, including all of my plans and all of my designs. Then I shut it down, removed the hard drive, and replaced it with a new one. I put everything in my bag and reinstalled Windows. I spent the rest of the day researching our competitors on my phone. I logged onto the Monster website to look for engineering jobs in the South London, Surrey area, and then left for the day. That evening, after another silent dinner, I went to my office. I discovered that one of our major competitors, going through a financial downturn, was looking for a mechanical engineer to help design and run the shop. It wasn't exactly what I wanted, but pretty darn close. They were offering a salary pound 10K less than my current salary, so I sent an email and attached my CV. That night, I decided to sleep in our marital bed, just so I wouldn't disturb Holly. However, I made sure I was already asleep when she walked in. I felt her rubbing against me and I felt sick to my stomach. But as sick as it felt good to react that way. She became disgusted with me, and that would help me in the long run. The next day, I received a call from a very surprised Robert Williams of Sutton Hydraulics. We spoke briefly, and he couldn't believe that I would consider leaving Walker Engineering for his small company. He offered me the job almost immediately, but I insisted on an interview the next day. He accepted. Another important screw was put in place, and the wheels started turning very quickly. I had a lot of free time, so I started looking for apartments in the area. I didn't need a house, and although there weren't many options, I managed to find one very nice apartment to rent. It was £1,200 a month with 2 bedrooms and was perfect for me. The apartment was 15 minutes from the girls and 5 minutes from work. I arranged a viewing the day after my interview with Robert Williams was over. I then spoke to Jack and told him that I needed to meet my daughters in Kingston the next day to sign some papers, but he just brushed me off and said, "Go." That night I called my best friend Toby Brown. We'd known each other since 6th grade. We had both gone to Kingston, but he had studied finance and math. He was now a big banking analyst in the city and lived with his wife and kids in a nice house in Twickenham. Most of all, he and his wife hated Holly, so we rarely spoke to each other as a couple. Holly was jealous of Sarah because she was an ambitious web developer and married to a rich banker. I guess even with everything I was giving her, I still wasn't up to her level. I arranged to meet Toby the next night after the interview and apartment viewing. He knew I had something on my mind, but I told him I'd tell him all about it when we met. Along the way, I thought about many things. Today was important not only for my plan for the near future, but also for my future. At this point, I had no idea how the girls would react. Until the recent revelations, I had planned to retire at 55. I was thinking of investing in a villa in Italy or somewhere else. My mortgage would be paid off when I turned 50, and the extra 5 years of work would allow us to accumulate a nice little fund without relying on a retirement wallet. My new job was about 20 minutes away from the girls' apartment. The meeting went quickly. The apartment was perfect, so I had plenty of time before meeting Toby, so I grabbed lunch for me and the girls and headed to their apartment. They lived together, and I was paying half the rent. As I approached the house, I didn't know what I would say to them. I didn't know how often they talked to their mom, but I knew I didn't want to hide anything from them. When they saw me, they ran up and grabbed me as I was already walking through the door. My smile could be seen from space. I missed them both so much. "Daddy, Daddy!" they shouted, laughing as if they were still toddlers. They led me into the house, and I laid out the lunch I had grabbed on the way. We sat and ate while they told me about their lives and schoolwork. I was so proud of my two girls. Sophie had already studied pharmacology for 2 years, and Ava was studying nursing. 2 professions for loving and caring people. I saw Rachel in them and talked at length about our new family, promising that we would all meet soon. When we finished lunch, I took a sip of coffee and wondered, they knew something was going on. "What is it, Daddy? Spill it," Sophie said. "Well, you know your mom cheated on me, right?" said I. They both looked at each other, then returned their gaze to me and nodded in unison. "Well, I've had enough and I've decided I'm going to leave her," I muttered to everyone's smiles. "Good," Ava said. "About time, Daddy," Sophie added. "You're not mad or anything, girls?" I asked timidly. "No, Daddy, for as long as I can remember, she's been a bitch to you," Sophie growled. I thought about reprimanding her for disrespecting her mother, but I didn't. In fact, I thought, good for Sophie. I also felt ashamed again, because they had obviously seen this growing up. I hoped they wouldn't follow in their mother's footsteps as far as men were concerned. I hoped I hadn't hurt them in any way because I was too weak and pathetic. I also hoped that I respected them. "What are you going to do, Daddy?" asked Ava. I told them that I had a new job and that I would be moving closer to them. They were thrilled, but also surprised that I had actually decided to move away from their cheating mother and had already made plans to do so. For that, I received 2 strong and loving hugs. I told them I would do everything I could to protect my financial future without going into too much detail. When I got up to leave, they said they would support me no matter what, and although they loved their mother, she came second to me, and she always had. I left their apartment full of happiness and was now ready for the next phase of my plan. This was the most important part. Toby and Sarah met a few years after he left university. They are 2 of the nicest people I know, and tonight I would be counting on their favor. I was greeted warmly as usual, but my mind was spinning about what I would be asking of them, and they both knew I was out of my depth. They wanted to know at once what was going on, and I told them. There was no point in beating around the bush. I told them everything that had happened, and the first part of my plans. They were more surprised by my resistance than by Holly's infidelity. It was quite commonplace in their eyes. "So why did you dump her now, Alex?" asked Sarah, handing me another cup of tea. I declined something stronger since I had to drive home today. I always thought she was cheating on me, but I couldn't prove it. Now she admitted it, and everything fell into place. I also discovered something that made me say I'd had enough. I told them about meeting my cousins and that my mom kicked my dad out of the house and that my sisters sided with her. My father was just like me, or rather, I was just like him. But this time my girls are on my side. So it was this discovery that prompted you to finally stand up for yourself? Asked Toby. Worry was written all over his face. No. I was taken to my father's grave. I was hesitant at first, but I managed to lay flowers and say a few words. Then I looked at the engraving on the stone, which shocked me. That's when I realized I had to leave, I explained. What was that, Alex? They said in unison. It had a rose on it, and below it was the inscription, in memory of him. There was the date of his birth, and below that the age at which he died. There was silence for a moment before I spoke again. He died at the age of 44. The age I am now. Toby and Sarah recoiled slightly at this news, and I realized they understood. There were times when I could reach for a shot glass like he did, or drive myself to suicide like my grandmother thought he was doing. I had a choice, be like him or fight back, I said clearly. I decided that I wasn't going to kill myself anymore by trying to be the perfect husband while being bullied and ridiculed. At that moment, I felt weaker than I had in weeks. Admitting to my friends how down I was harder than I'd realized. Toby had knocked me off my game. What do you want from us, Alex? Please refuse if it's too much, but I have a plan to protect myself and— Get that bitch down, intervened Sarah. I smiled and nodded. Sarah did seem to have a tough side to her character. When I thought she was having an affair in 2008, I opened a separate savings account and put all my bonuses and all my spare cash into it. I was also lucky that the only way I could get a mortgage loan for the amount we needed was to apply in my name only. Holly had no real employment history, so it was easier for me to apply a loan. I knew that if anyone was capable of following my train of thought, it was Toby. My savings with interest are now worth £60,800. I have £120,000 left on my mortgage, but the house in the next street over from me has sold for over £500,000. Toby, I need you and your connections to get me a short-term loan for the remaining £60,000. I want to pay off the mortgage before I divorce her when I divorce her. Why bother? It means she can have half, Sarah said. Well, unless you count the 60-odd thousand pounds in savings I'm keeping, she can fight for half of everything anyway. But that's where you come in, I said, pausing for a second. I want you to incorporate a new company. What do you mean register a new company? Toby interjected. I want to transfer ownership of my house to your new company. That means she won't be able to lay her hands on it. I've looked into it, and if I pay off the mortgage, all I have to do is go to the land registry and transfer the paperwork to your company. Toby and Sarah looked at each other for a moment. Will that work, Alex? I mean, if you divorce her, she'll hire a lawyer and fight for everything. She doesn't have the money for it, and I'm sure her parents won't want to pay such a huge bill if they know their daughter is a cheating whore. Plus, I'm hoping to use her opinion of me to my advantage, I said. How? Asked Toby. She thinks I'm a coward who will never leave her. So I won't ask for a divorce until I sell the house. The property becomes cash, and by the time she realizes I'm divorcing her, we can move that money into a lot of different accounts. Toby just smiled at me and said, I never knew you had it in you, Alex. So you're going to help me? I asked. Oh, yes. I'll get right on it, but you know a good lawyer will try to trace the money, don't you? He said. Yes, but it will take a long time, and she won't be able to afford a big legal bill. After another hour of conversation, I headed home. All the pieces were coming together. On the way home, I decided that I wasn't even going to file for divorce. I was sure I wouldn't meet anyone else, let alone remarry, and that way I would have more time. I figured Holly wouldn't be bothered by my absence for at least a month. At that thought, I laughed to myself. By next week, I'd be gone. When I got home, it was almost 2 a.m. I looked in on Holly and she was sound asleep. No remorse is keeping her awake, I thought. I decided to go to the spare room. Thursday morning, I was up and out of the house before Holly even woke up. I wrote my resignation letter in the morning, and around lunchtime I called Toby. I've got good news, bad news, and then good news again, buddy. Okay, let's go in that order, I said, laughing. The good news is that I have registered the company. It only takes an hour at the company house, he said. The bad news is that to get a loan for the amount you need, you'll need some serious collateral. Something like a house, and that won't work for you. I was frustrated and scratching my head trying to think of something when Toby continued. Listen, Alex. You trust me, and I trust you. I've been talking to Sarah about this, and we've been thinking the same thing. I'll transfer £60,000 into your account right now so you can get on the case. Just give me the money back when you find it, okay? I was stunned. If he could see my face now, he would realize how grateful I was. This is too much, Toby. You've done enough already, I interrupted. Just take the money and go do what you need to do, he said. You have no idea how much this helps me, buddy. I owe you a huge debt of gratitude. Just do it. Walk away from this disrespectful money-grabbing scammer and be happy. That's all we care about. I gave him my details and ended the call. My next call was to the bank for a meeting the next day. After work, or lack thereof, I drove to the local Land Rover dealership. I knew the guy because that's where I bought Holly's Range Rover Sport about 10 months ago. In fact, I was still paying for it. I had an idea on how to get some more money. Hello, Mr. Price. Have you finally decided on a new car? John Reeves met me at the entrance. He was the owner of the dealership. No, John. I wanted to discuss selling my wife's car and paying off my debt, I said, looking more pleased than I should have. I hope everything's okay? He asked. It's okay. You've met her, and you know how demanding she is. Now she wants a Mercedes 4x4. I don't want to say anything bad, but she seemed annoying, he admitted. We came to an agreement that he would take the Range Rover back and we would cancel our payment plan. I promised to come back to upgrade my car, and he knew he could offset the value of Holly's car by selling it as practically new. I apologized for the inconvenience, but the thought of him selling me an expensive new Range Rover more than made up for it. On the way out, I picked up a 2016 brochure, but not for myself, but for Holly. When I got home, Holly was sitting in the living room drinking coffee, looking a little pale. I took off my jacket and threw my bag on the floor. Everything okay, love? I asked through clenched teeth. Yeah, just feeling a little tired, honey, she said, taking a sip from her mug. She held out her arms as if wanting me to hug her and make her feel better. I ignored her, went back to my bag, and pulled out a brochure. I know what will make you feel better, I said. I walked over to her and sat down on the coffee table across from her. She looked confused at the empty seat next to her and back at me. What have you got there? She asked, looking at the pamphlet. Your car is almost a year old, and I was at the dealership today and saw their new model. It's awesome, I said as her eyes lit up. I want my wife to have the best, so I'm going to trade in your car and buy you this one, I said, pointing to the new 2017 model in the brochure. Oh, how I love that, she said, ignoring my plan. You always know how to make me feel better, don't you, Alex? The only problem is that they already have a buyer for your car, so I need to get it there by Friday afternoon. I'll finish work early and drive it to the dealership, and you can just use mine this weekend to visit your loved ones. The last remark made her recoil, and a look of shock and confusion appeared on her face. What's wrong? I asked. Nothing, Alex. I just thought you were still mad about our arrangement, she asked. It wasn't our arrangement, Holly. It was yours. I didn't have a say in it. But I guess I don't really have a choice, do I? I said, hoping for an answer. She only nodded, as if she had finally put me in my place, and I admitted defeat. I love you, Alex. I turned to look at her and was met with a sincere look of concern. I didn't say anything in response and just walked away to the kitchen. The phone rang and I went out into the garden to answer it. Toby confirmed that the money had been transferred. I was ready to go. The next day, wasting no time, I walked into the bank and found myself in the office of a mortgage loan officer. She looked to be about my age, but she wasn't wearing a wedding ring. I wondered if there might be a life after Holly, but dismissed the thought to the back of my mind. An hour later, the mortgage was paid off. All my remaining accounts were closed. I went through several houses and opened a new account at another bank. I was happy knowing I wouldn't have to pay anything else unless Holly hired a lawyer and went to court. My smile faded. I walked back to the office, ignoring Olivia as she rose to her feet to speak. I sat down with a cup of coffee and contemplated the next stage of my plan. I contacted the land registry and filled out the appropriate online application form. I had all the details of Toby and Sarah's new company, and within 10 minutes of submitting the application, I received a confirmation email stating that it would take 5 days to process. After that, I would simply hand the paperwork over to Toby, and he could register the property to his company. I decided to wander around the internet looking for furniture and details of canceling utilities in the house. I had to wait for the right time, but I did start new accounts for my apartment in Sutton. I finally have one more thing left to do, something I've been putting off. I knocked on Jack's door. Olivia was there with him, of course. That dirty old bastard usually fiddled with her on Fridays, and I seemed to be interrupting their lovemaking. She left us alone. "What can I do to help Alex?" he said cheerfully, escorting Olivia out of the room with a glance. I put my resignation letter on his desk. He looked at me with a silly grin on his face. "What is it?" he asked. "I have resigned," I replied. "I think it would be best if I left at once. Given the situation with our families, I doubt you'll want me here for too long." He looked dumbfounded. "I'd appreciate it if you could have my P45 ready by Monday, and please don't tell anyone about it. My wife doesn't know," I said defiantly. But you can't do that. We need you," he said pathetically. "Not as much as you need your nephew. I'll be here on Monday to pick up the last of his things." I pretended to drop a pen from my pocket and, bending over, pulled a digital voice recorder out of my sock. I managed to attach a pin to it, and standing up, I pressed the record button and slid it under the seat and into the wooden frame. If that's all Jack needs, I've got things to do. "Okay, Alex, but don't come crawling back when you're out of money. Your money is the only thing keeping that cheating wife with you. Do you realize that?" "Of course I know that, Jack." "I wish my wife was as faithful as yours," I said, smiling. I knew that hit him where it hurt. I turned and walked out of his office. An hour later, I drove home and picked up Holly's car and magazine. I drove to the dealership and dropped off her car. Fortunately, John Reeves offered to drive me home, and I gladly accepted. When I got home that evening, Holly was sitting at the kitchen table with big red bags under her eyes. I knew she had been crying. "What's going on, Halsey?" I asked with feigned sincerity. "We need to talk, Alex," she said, gesturing for me to sit down. For a moment, I felt like I was being snitched on. A feeling of terror came over me. "What's going on?" I asked. "I was at the doctor's office today, and I was diagnosed." She hesitated. There were a lot of thoughts swirling around in my head. If this was serious, what kind of man would I have to be to leave a seriously ill woman, as I was about to do? I have," she stammered. "Just tell me, Holly, what is it?" I begged her to spit it out. "I have gonorrhea," she finally said, bursting into tears. I laughed. Hell, I laughed, and she just stared at me. "It's not funny." "I'm so embarrassed." I turned to her, and she looked confused. This was supposed to be humiliating. "Well, I know I don't have one because I haven't touched you in over a month, and when I found out about your adventures, I used protection," I said, trying not to gloat too much. "Oh, so everything's fine with you so far, is that normal?" She was silent. "Just take your medication and soon you'll be standing on your back again. Oops, I mean on your feet." "If looks could kill, I'd be dead by now." "Just find out which one of them gave it to you and tell them to take it to the doctors before it spreads the disease further," I said, getting up and leaving her crying at the table. That night, I got a good night's sleep for the first time in months. Of course, I slept in the spare room. I shouldn't have taken any chances with an exhausted wife. Saturday morning, I felt great. A good night's sleep definitely helped me, so I went to our bedroom and woke Holly up in bed to tell her that I was going to give her some time to rest and recover. "I'm going to the girls. I'll give them all your wishes. Get some rest, okay?" I said with as much love as I could feign. She smiled at me and asked me to hug her. I gave in, but I did it half-heartedly. When she released her grip, she must have sensed that something was wrong with me. She looked at me sadly and said, "You think I'm disgusting, don't you?" I said nothing, and suddenly tears ran down her cheeks. "I just want you to feel better, that's all." "Oh, Alex, I love you so much. I think I screwed up big time. I told Allison about my problem, and she was horrified. At first I felt sorry for her, but she disappeared even faster than I thought she would. It shocked me a little. Then I realized that I had lost all love for the woman I had been married to for 21 years. Could she really have disappeared so quickly? Obviously she could because I was ready for it, and her situation couldn't stop me. Without saying anything, I left the room. I got into the car and drove away happily. Later in the morning, I was seated with the girls, and I told them everything that had happened. They were amazed, and I could see that they had a new respect for me. I told them about Holly's little trip to the doctors, which they found hilarious. I shouldn't have laughed, but I couldn't help it, and it suggested to me that maybe the girls really did hate her as much as I did. "What's she going to do about Daddy?" asked Ava. "She'll have to move in with her grandparents or convince one of her lovers to take her in." I have a feeling those two degenerates were only interested in having sex with a married woman and bragging about it. I doubt they would want to have a relationship with her. What do you think? I asked. They both just looked at me and shook their heads. That evening, I stayed with Toby and Sarah, who were hosting a dinner party attended by many of their friends and coworkers. Among the invitees were several single women my age, and I felt confident enough to strike up a conversation with them. The alcohol helped me approach one woman named Amy who caught my eye. She was a divorced friend of Sarah's, and as the drinks flowed, she even managed to talk me into dancing. It was a fun night, and it was what I really needed. A night where I wasn't thinking about Holly, the end of my marriage, or my plans to leave her, as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. When I got home late Sunday morning, I found Holly doing chores around the house. I walked into the living room, and when she saw me, she rushed over to me and hugged me. I just patted her on the back. "Where were you staying last night, Alex? I thought you were coming home," she asked. "Toby and Sarah had a dinner party, and I had too much to drink, so I slept on their couch," I replied nonchalantly. "That's not like you. Did you have fun?" she asked, giving me a wary look. I had to be careful not to give anything away, so I pulled out my phone and showed her some pictures. Her face soon turned red. "Who is that woman?" she asked angrily. "Oh, this is Amy. She's Sarah's friend. She made me dance. It was a lot of fun." I looked up from the phone and saw Holly staring at me angrily. The irony of her being mad at me didn't settle in my mind. She was mad at me for innocently dancing around when she was having sex with some guy every week. "I want to go with you next time." "I haven't seen the guys in a while," she said, returning to her normal color. I made my way to the kitchen and put the kettle on. Holly followed me. "Did you feel okay without the car?" I tried to fill the silent air with small talk. "I'm doing fine." "When is my new car coming?" she asked. "They said it would be delivered on Wednesday." I turned around and saw that she looked somewhat concerned. "But if you want to pick it up, you can come Monday afternoon and pick it up." "I have things to do on Monday, getting my hair done and going shopping with my sister," she replied, obviously not too concerned about the missing car. "I can drop you off in town to meet your sister, and then you can have her drive you to the dealership. And then you can come back in your new Range Rover," I said with an excited grin. She smiled and came toward me with open arms. I turned back to the kettle, pretending not to notice her. The rest of the day, Holly was by my side, and I felt awkward. She kept trying to kiss me or hug me, and I kept making excuses to leave. I think she realized what it was about, because when I went to bed, I saw that she was crying again. "Good night, Holly." "Will you sleep with me tonight, Alex? I want to snuggle up to you, and I want you to tell me everything's going to be okay." I didn't feel anything. "Not until you get permission from Dr. Holly." "I'm sorry, but you made your own bed," I said stiffly. "Well, when I get better, I'm sure I can find a man who wants to get into bed with me." "I still have a lot of lost time to make up for," she snapped bitterly. I laughed to myself. It took longer than I expected, but here she was. The bitch was back. All regrets of Friday night were gone. For the last 21 years, I would have fallen for her shit. But this time, I ignored her tears and headed for the spare room. Last night in my house, and she would be in the spare room. I was also glad she said those words. It removed any sign of doubt I might have had. I looked at my picture of her and my sisters, and all I felt was hatred for her. She was nice when she wanted something and a bitch when she couldn't have it. Monday morning, I woke up early. Holly woke up early, too. She had an appointment with her hairdresser at 8:30, so I drove her into town as planned. "Don't forget to take a cab to the dealership around 2 in the afternoon. They're waiting for you," I said, ignoring her attempts to kiss me. I drove off, knowing that this might be the last time I would see her. Somehow I was afraid it wouldn't happen, but it would be as long as I could make it happen. On the way out, I called the cell phone company and canceled both of our contracts. I pulled over to the side of the road to pay the fine on my card. They informed me that the phones would be working until 5 p.m. Great. I then went to the office to pick up my P45. I entered the factory and there was a solemn atmosphere. The news of my departure must have reached everyone, and for a brief moment I saw a look of fear on their faces. I did not know why. Walking down the hallway toward my office, I passed the coffee machine where the usual suspects had gathered. I wasn't sure if Max and Henry knew they both had sex with my wife or not. But they both smirked as they looked at me and exchanged jokes with the other assholes. "Good morning, guys," I said cheerfully. "Good morning, Alex. How's the wife?" They said this to the usual laughter. How that joke is still funny today is beyond me. "Not very much, I'm afraid," I replied. "One of you underdogs swiped it." I walked away in complete silence, and when I turned around, their jaws dropped and Max yelled something to Henry. I heard a big noise before I headed up the stairs. Olivia saw me coming and she half smiled, lowering her head. Maybe now I was getting some respect. Jack was at the door before I could knock. "I have what you need, so take it and get out." Maybe this respect story was a figment of my imagination. I entered his office and sat down. I reached under the chair and discreetly put the recorder in my pocket. I knew he'd laid out his weekly Friday night story to Olivia, and now I had it all on the recorder. "So you have another job, Alex?" he snapped back. At first I didn't pay attention to him, but then I decided I would give him what he wanted. "No, nothing," I said. A wide smile appeared on his face, and he probably figured I'd come crawling back to him soon. "So I get my last month's paycheck and my year-end bonus?" I asked. He burst into laughter when Olivia walked in with my P45. "What's so funny?" she asked. "Alex just asked for his bonus and salary to be given to him." "That's hilarious," Olivia said, joining in his laughter. I thought, why not, and joined in too. It made them stop and look at me like I was crazy. "Why are you laughing, Alex?" said Olivia. "I don't know, Olivia. Why do you let that old bastard have sex with you every week?" I said, laughing louder and louder. They froze as her eyes widened and Jack began to redden with anger. I'm sure Mom and Dad are proud of their slutty little girl. She threw my papers on the floor and ran out of the room in tears. "You bastard," Jack said. "Get out of my office and out of my company before I get the guys to drag you out by your ears." I laughed, walking out of the house and heading to my office to pack the last of my things. I was still laughing to myself when I pulled up in front of my house. I got out of the car and lowered the back seats. I opened the trunk and walked into the house. I walked around the house thinking about what I wanted to take with me. I had several Romero Brito works, so I took them down and wrapped them in plastic I found in the garage. I packed them in the car and continued walking around the house packing. Finally, I went upstairs and emptied out my closet. I pulled all of my documents out of the safe, including the girls' birth certificates and marriage license. I found an attic ladder, went upstairs and found all my old stuff. My diploma and family photos were there. I went to the handyman and took all the jewelry I had brought with me from Holly over the years. They must have cost over 10,000 pounds, and then I took all the handbags, shoes, and expensive coats I'd brought back too. In fact, the whole bloody closet was bought by me, so I took everything. I've always been a responsible person, so I had receipts for almost all the stuff for insurance, and that will serve me well when I come to sell it all. When I finished packing, I realized I would need a TV, so I took that as well, along with my movie collection and Blu-ray player, of course. By this time, my car was too full. I figured I might lose all of Holly's clothes and a few other things I really didn't need, including some of my old clothes. The new me would require a new closet, and the girls wouldn't fail to seize the opportunity to help me with that. I found all the best pictures of me and the girls and put them in the car. I wasn't in any hurry to get anywhere, because Holly wasn't going to be back until after 2 in the afternoon. I made a cup of tea and took 5 minutes to myself. You have to have a cup of tea. I think it's on the Magna Carta. I picked up the phone, called the telco, and canceled satellite TV, phone, and internet. I called British Gas and Southern Water to cancel the utilities. It would take a few days, but I didn't care. I went back to the bedroom and sat on the bed when I noticed something that gave me a thought that scared even me. It was at the very top of the closet in a dusty old box. It was Holly's wedding dress. She loved it, probably more than I did. I took it off and then found our wedding album among the box of pictures on the bed. Grabbing the duvet cover, I gathered up all my things and headed out into the garden. Once outside, I walked to the middle of the garden and piled everything into a pile. I added all of Holly's clothes and her things that I knew I wouldn't be able to sell. I made sure to leave only her underwear because I didn't want anything to get contaminated. I went to my car and locked all the doors. I was ready to leave, and when I looked at my watch, I saw it was only 1:45 p.m., so I called Robert Williams and told him I could give my P45 later that evening, along with the night shift. That way I could start work again tomorrow morning. He was thrilled, and I told him I was already working on plans to get new customers and improve the hydraulic pumps that would make it super competitive in the marketplace. I think he sensed my enthusiasm, and as I wrapped up the conversation, I hoped I had made his day. It was already 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was sitting there waiting for the call. Finding some paint thinner in the garage, I went out into the garden and poured it on my wedding dress. I was about to light the fire when the phone rang. "Hi," I said calmly. "What's going on, Alex?" yelled Holly into the phone. "What do you mean, Holly?" I asked sarcastically. "Don't play dumb, Alex," she continued. "Calm down, Holly. What's going on?" There was silence, and I heard her breathing heavily. I heard her sister's voice in the background. "I was told you didn't bring me a new car. You sold me mine." "Oh, yes. Did I forget to tell you that?" said I. "What are you talking about, Alex? What's going on?" She started to panic. "Well, from now on, if you need a car, you can pay for it yourself," I said, trying to stay as calm as I could. My heart was pounding frantically. I don't understand, Alex," she said meekly and confused. "You heard me perfectly well, Holly. If you want it, you can buy it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to clean up the kitchen." What, is this some kind of sick joke?" I didn't say anything. "We'll talk about it when I get home, Alex." "I'm not satisfied with being coddled," she shouted. I was silent again. I heard her panting as if she was pacing to her sister's car. The slamming of the door confirmed it. I knew she was on her way. In this condition, she could convince her sister to be here in 5 minutes. "Alex, Alex, Alex." "Yes," I replied almost too calmly. "You said you were in our kitchen?" she asked, suddenly realizing what I had said. "Yes." "Why aren't you at work?" she asked. I didn't say anything. "Alex, Alex, Alex." Her breath caught, and I could hear the panic and confusion in her voice. I hung up the phone as she continued to call out my name. I went outside, struck a match, and lit the fire. Our past flared up as I walked away. I pulled the marriage certificate out of my pocket, ripped it to shreds, and left it on the kitchen table, along with the only picture of us all vacationing at Disneyland. It was a wonderful time with many happy memories. I wonder if she thought the same? I got in the car and drove away. When I got to the end of the street, I saw Holly and Jennifer pull up to the house in the rearview mirror. Neither of them looked up. They just ran into the house. I turned my phone off, smiled, and pulled away. The A3 was practically empty as I drove towards my new home. For some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that gripped me. I knew this wasn't the last time I'd see Holly, and once my plan came to fruition, she would do anything to hunt me down and make me pay. That was the kind of person she was. I also knew she'd get the girls involved, and I didn't want them to be burdened with our problems, especially since they needed to focus on their studies. I was in Sutton by 4 o'clock in the afternoon and decided I had time to visit the local phone store and get a new cell phone contract. I also managed to catch the administration team at work, processing my P45, and met Freya, my new receptionist. She was quite young but kept a very professional demeanor, a complete contrast to Olivia. I went back to my new apartment, which was completely empty. I had water and electricity, so I found a kettle I had brought with me from home and made a cup of tea. I moved my stuff in and ordered a pizza. I picked up my old cell phone and turned it on. The connection was broken. I smiled to myself, knowing that Holly was now without her phone too, and that should give the girls some respite before I could talk to them. I found my sleeping bag and spread it out in the living room and waited for dinner. I was supposed to have some furniture delivered over the weekend, but for now I was glad to at least be away from Holly. I turned on my laptop and found the voice recordings I'd made in Jack Walker's office. I downloaded the contents and listened to them to hear incriminating evidence of his infidelity to Olivia. I took 2 flash drives and made multiple copies. I wrote the addresses of Margaret Walker, Jack's wife, and Peter Lewis, Olivia's boyfriend, and then inserted a thumb drive into each. I'll send them off tomorrow before work. Finally, I decided to call my daughter Sophie to give her the latest news and not to let their mother know where I was. To my surprise, she admitted that she hadn't even talked to her mother yet. But of course, my guess is that she didn't have a phone to do that. Within a week, I had time to furnish my apartment, and with no time to waste at work, I contacted Walker Engineering's clients and convinced them to switch to Sutton. They saw what we were offering and very quickly jumped ship. A couple people decided to stay with Jack, but most hated him but tolerated him because of the superior products we offered. I knew Jack wouldn't immediately understand why his business was losing customers, but I didn't care. I also knew that now that my old house had all the utilities shut off, Holly would realize I wasn't coming back. There was no way she could afford to pay the bills, so I knew that Toby could safely begin the selling process. Sarah was more than happy to take on the task, and by the end of the week, signs were up on the house. It was at this time that Ava contacted me. Apparently, Holly had moved into her parents' house, and they were not happy that their little princess had gone rogue. Holly, of course, was out for my blood and was furious at what I had done to her. Strangely, I found great satisfaction in it, but I knew it wasn't over yet. By the weekend, I was invited to another dinner party at Toby and Sarah's house. I was told that Amy would be there and that she had asked Sarah about me. I learned that she had gotten divorced a few years ago and had been single since her husband left her a year before the divorce. Apparently, the divorce went well. She got the house and full custody of the children, as well as financial support. Unfortunately, she has been skeptical of men ever since. Sarah told her about my situation, and she's wanted to meet me ever since. That's why they planned this dinner party. She was 2 years younger than me and had 2 older teenage children. I felt like I was being set up, but decided it couldn't hurt. The dinner was a success, and I felt completely relaxed for the first time since I'd thought about running away from Holly. Amy understood what I was going through, didn't push me or let me know that she liked me. We got drunk, danced together, and at the end of the night we exchanged numbers. She told me to call if I needed someone to talk to, and I thanked her. I slept in the spare room of Toby's house, but it was getting harder and harder to fight the hangover, and the coffee wasn't helping. Sunday morning brought good news. Just a week after putting it up for sale, I received 2 serious offers. One of them I immediately accepted for £550,000. I knew it could be some time before the deal was finalized, but I agreed the money as soon as it was ready. I would open an ISA in the girls' names and then ask Toby to distribute the remaining amount between numerous investment funds. I would also return the money to him and take some of it in cash to keep in a home safe. I still felt the need to protect myself. Another week went by and I was happy to hear from Toby that the sale could be very quick. I contacted the moving company and instructed them to vacate my old house. The girls called their mother and asked if she needed anything, and she became even angrier and more threatening. I promised the girls that it would be over soon. On Tuesday morning, I was talking to one of our new customers who was meeting with Jack Walker about a possible supply contract extension. He told Jack that he was moving to Sutton Engineering, and Jack was not surprised. He learned that Walker Engineering had to cut 50% of their staff due to job losses. He also informed me that Mrs. Walker was divorcing Jack due to adultery. I had absolutely no sympathy as I was counting commission checks in my head as we talked. I had no idea what had happened to Olivia and her boyfriend, but I knew he got my gift if Mrs. Walker got hers, and even if she didn't, I'm sure she was well aware of why Mrs. Walker was divorcing her husband. I wonder what her friends and family would think about her cheating with an old man. To reward me for my new job, I was given a brand new Land Rover Discovery HSE. I was already thinking of treating myself, but Robert and the bosses were so pleased with me and how the company was progressing that they gave me the car and a few thousand in commission. It was actually over £30,000. I was looking out my office window admiring my new car when a familiar Ford Focus pulled into the parking lot. I froze, realizing who it belonged to. It was Diana's car, Holly's mom. I sat back in my chair and waited for the inevitable call. The bitch had finally found me. The phone rang in my office and I picked it up. Mr. Price, there's a woman sitting in the waiting room who claims to be your wife, said Freya, my secretary. Tell her I have a meeting and I'll be down in an hour. 3 hours later, I looked out the window and she was still sitting there. I exhaled noisily and decided to leave for the night. If she saw me, I'd have to deal with it, and if she didn't, I'd just drive past. It wasn't like she knew which car to pay attention to. I walked out the side door and headed to my car. I was just getting into my car when I heard tires screeching, and before I knew it, she had pulled up and was blocking my way. She jumped out of the car and stormed over to me with a face like thunder. She looked like hell. Her clothes were clearly her sister's old clothes, and her hair looked like it hadn't been brushed in weeks. "You bastard!" she screamed, hurling a slap in my direction, but missed. "I hate you! I hate you!" "Yeah, I hate you too, Holly. Now say what you want to say and then get out of my life," I said, trying to stay calm. She just looked at me with tears rolling down her cheeks. "You ruined my life, you bastard," she whispered pitifully. I didn't say anything. I just kept listening. "You destroyed all my belongings, my wedding dress and clothes." So far, it was all about her, and I wasn't surprised. "And then you cancel and force me to move in with Mom and Dad," she continued. She just stared at me and waited for me to speak. "Was it all Holly?" I asked. "Haven't you anything to say for yourself?" she shouted. I thought for a second before inviting her into my car. She was taken aback, but I didn't want to be a public spectacle anymore. When we sat down, I saw how bad she looked. She seemed to have aged, and I wondered if all that plus the venereal disease had taken its toll on her appearance. "Please come home, Alex. We can put all this behind us. I forgive you." What did she just say? Are my ears deceiving me? "Do you forgive me?" I asked, hoping I'd misheard. "Yes, Alex, I will forgive you for destroying my things and my life." "Are you delirious, Holly?" I asked. She just looked at me like I was crazy. "You openly cheat on me and disrespect me when I give you everything, and you have the nerve to say you forgive me." But I thought..." "No, Holly, you're only thinking of yourself. I'll never be with you again, so go away and be with one of your lovers," I said coldly. She moved awkwardly in her chair, and I realized. "I suppose once you suddenly became single, they didn't need you?" I asked. "They accused me of giving them an STD and said I was just having a little fun. They said they would never want to have me as a girlfriend because I'm a cheating bitch." For a second, I even thought it was cruel, but she had already made the bed. "Well, that was obvious, Holly. So go find someone else." "My girlfriend started treating me differently. Now we've broken up and their husbands have started questioning their fidelity, which means I've been kicked to the curb. I can be a bad influence if you can believe it." The word separation stuck in my head. I knew it meant that I was still connected to her, and I felt sad. "My parents are disgusted, and everyone in town has heard about my venereal disease, no doubt thanks to my so-called friends and lovers. And now some of the factory employees have lost their jobs, and that's my fault too." The truth was that she herself was partly to blame for all the bad things that had happened to her. But I felt sympathy for her. She had messed up and was paying the price, but how great that price was. She had a beautiful life, and she ruined it because of greed and disrespect. However, I knew I had to move on with my life. "I have nothing left, Alex. I need you, and I want you back in my life. I have no money, no job. When will I get my share of the house?" "Here it is." "You've never once told me you love me." "You just need me, Holly, and I don't need you. As for the house, I didn't pay the mortgage and I lost it," I lied. Her eyes widened and her jaw dropped. She was shocked by my words, but at least I knew how this visit would turn out. "I want a divorce," I said. "No, please, Alex, of course I love you. Over 20 years together, and I made a little mistake and you're burning me out. A very big, unforgivable mistake, Holly, and I'm never coming home to you." "Please, Alex," she shouted, and her screams echoed throughout the car. "I need a clean break, and if you agree, I'll give you £30,000 in cash," I offered. I saw her face change, and the tears were replaced by a new determination. "No," she shouted. "I will fight you in court for everything." "There's no way you'll lose the house. You're too smart for that." "Damn it!" She was right, and now I'm on her hind legs. "All right, Holly. I'll say this," I began. You're never going to get a penny from me. She moved her hips and moved forward toward me. I'll fight you for anything and more, Alex. You have no money, Holly, and I'll move my assets so much that you'll spend a fortune trying to find the money. I'm smart, so by the time your lawyer finds it, you'll have run up a bill that will negate any benefit. I suggest you take the money I'm offering, or I'll give it away too. It's up to you, I said sternly, keeping my eyes on her. You bastard! I loved you and bore you children, and this is how you treat me? She said angrily. Thanks to me, our girls will go far. They won't be liars and cheats. They'll be selfless, not selfish like their mother. So take the money and get out of my life. My anger started to surface, and she looked at me like I was a stranger. All right, she hissed. I'll take the money and agree to the divorce. Okay. I'll set it up. With those words, she got out of my car and slammed the door shut. A few seconds later, she sped out of the parking lot. The next day, I filed for divorce on grounds of adultery, and a week later, I arranged to meet Holly at the girl's apartment. The sale of my house went through, but I wouldn't put any money into it until the papers were signed. We tried to be polite in front of the girls, but it wasn't easy. I handed Holly the money and she signed the papers. I kissed the girls goodbye and wished Holly good luck. When I was about to leave, she burst into tears again, but I had a feeling it was for the girls' benefit. Sophie and Ava looked at me and raised their eyebrows. They knew. I'll see you next weekend, Dad, Ava said as I walked to the door. I went back into the room. Holly was still sobbing, and no one was paying attention to her. I suddenly realized what Ava was talking about. Oh yeah, the Coldplay concert. Everyone's looking forward to it. Are we going to meet you in London or drive together? Asked Sophie. I'll talk to Amy and let you know during the week, I said one last time before I left. On my way out the door, I heard Holly yelling something, but I chose to ignore it and left.